let's wait about those biases. Let's talk about Jordan Peterson's shadow. So what is this shadow? What is a shadow? Well, he talks about shadows. The shadow is basically any aspect of consciousness or reality which you disown and deny as being part of yourself. It's something you call other to you and something you despise and hate, and you refuse to integrate into yourself. So for example, if you think Hitler is an evil monster, then Hitler is your shadow. By making him your shadow, you refuse to integrate him and to really fully understand where he was coming from. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm being very nuanced here. I'm not saying that Hitler is an angel and that there aren't serious problems with Hitler. There are very serious problems with Hitler. But if you think he's just pure evil and a monster, you've turned him into your shadow. You can turn anything in reality into your shadow. So what Jordan Peterson has done is he's turned stage green into his shadow, the social justice warrior types. And the problem fundamentally is that those of you who are following Jordan Peterson, precisely because perhaps 80 to 90% of his psychological material, non-political lectures and things, are very good psychology, and you should learn that, the other 10 to 20% is coming from his shadow. He can't really help but to exude his own the shadow comes through in his work, in his talk, in the way he carries himself, in his attitude, in his worldview. He can't help it. Nobody can. Your shadow will come through if you speak long enough. And so his shadow comes through, but most of his audience are not subtle enough to understand. They don't make these fine distinctions between stages and shadows and things. They don't understand, and so they get indoctrinated with his shadow. They get corrupted by his shadow. He kind of sneaks it in there. He's doing this unconsciously. I'm not saying he's doing this deliberately. And that's a disservice to the people following him, because then you are infected with his shadow, and that becomes your shadow. And this is especially problematic if you lean conservative, because Jordan Peterson has certain conservative leanings and biases. It's especially problematic if you lean conservative, because it's just going to reinforce his shadow against the stage green. Is just going to be reinforced. It's going to turn into a confirmation bias into your own mind, and then you're just going to buy the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker, and you yourself will get stuck at stage blue and orange and can't advance further. The point of this whole conversation is to unleash your mind from all of the obstacles so that you can get to the higher stages, beyond green to yellow and turquoise. So where does Jordan Peterson's shadow come from, and what is it exactly? Well, Jordan Peterson, you have to understand, I mean, he's fairly old, so he grew up during the Cold War era. He talks a lot about totalitarian regimes in Soviet Russia and in China, Maoism, Marxism, the old school Marxism, Soviet communism, Stalinism, and all of the evils of this. And, a common framing by conservatives is that, communism has killed 100 million people in the last century. And so he's coming from this perspective. And when you're coming from this perspective and you see college kids talking about socialism, you see he makes a conflation between the two. And he thinks that what's going on in universities today, on university campuses, with gender fluidity and gender equality and sort of anti-racism and Antifa movements and cultural Marxism, this sort of stuff, that this is just a rehash of what happened in Soviet Russia during the Red Revolution there. And this is a very big mistake. From this, he creates a shadow out of green because he misunderstands green. Anything you misunderstand about reality becomes your shadow if you don't like it. And so this is a very common conflation that's made deliberately by many conservatives, especially on Fox News, OAN, and all the talk radio, and even on YouTube, conservative YouTube. They keep making this conflation between stage green socialism or social democracy versus the old school style Venezuelan or sort of Russian, Soviet, or Maoist communism, when actually that sort of Maoist, Stalinist communism, that wasn't stage green. That was stage blue. That's the crucial mistake that conservatives make. And they make that mistake because they're paranoid. The way they frame in their mind what stage green is, they're so scared of it because they conflate it with the evils of the last century that in their mind, that justifies opposing it and demonizing it at any cost. They're not looking at it objectively. So what stage green actually is it's not the communism of old, of your granddaddy. What it is it's more like the social democracy of the northern Scandinavian countries. Yes, it could be socialism, but it doesn't even have to be socialism. The Scandinavian countries are not truly socialist. They're social democracies. They still have free markets and so on. And really, they're good places to live. The happiness index in Northern Europe is the highest in the world. The level of corruption in Northern European countries is the highest, the index for the level of corruption, which means that the higher the index is, the lower the corruption in the country, is actually higher than in the US. That means the US is more corrupt than Nordic countries. And levels of social equality and fairness are better in Nordic countries than they are in the United States. The Nordic countries are under no threat of turning into a Stalinist dictatorship. And to frame them in that way is a deep misunderstanding of human psychology, not just politics, human psychology and cultural psychology. That's the power of this spiral dynamics model that I shared with you. So, you have to be very careful about straw manning these different stages. It's very easy. It's very easy. If I wanted to straw man stage green, I could say, oh, they're all communists and they're all like Antifa and they're all going to turn violent and they're all going to go crazy and they're going to tax us to death and then that's going to lead to the destruction of America. Yeah, if you frame it that way in your mind, then yeah, it seems stupid. But that's not what stage green really is. You're misunderstanding it. See, I could also straw man stage blue. I could say that if we follow Jordan Peterson's advice of stage blue and we go back and we start to study the religious texts and so forth, we're all going to become irrational, superstitious. We're going to bring back the witch trials. We're going to start burning witches at the stake. And we're going to turn into Nazis because of nationalism. We're all going to turn racism. And then we're going to bring back slavery. See, that would be what it's like if I was very paranoid stage green and I made a shadow out of stage blue. Even though conservatives like to say that 100 million people were killed by communism, again, you have to be very careful with how your mind is cherry picking the data and the facts. Maybe that's true, but you also have to weigh it against how many people have been killed in the last century by capitalism. How many wars were started by capitalism? How many trillions of dollars have been lost? How many people have been exploited in sweatshops all around the world? How many people have had their incomes siphoned off? How many people have suffered under and died from opioid addiction, which is pushed by giant capitalistic corporations with predatory marketing and so forth? How many people have been scammed of their life savings? How many people have lost their retirement savings in Wall Street crashes and Ponzi schemes? How many democratically elected foreign governments were deposed and undermined into totalitarian dictatorships and theocracies by U.S. intelligence agencies for the purposes of advancing capitalist interests of giant multinational corporations? You see, so this idea that capitalism is innocent, it's not. Millions, many tens of millions of people have been exploited and deeply pained and even killed by capitalism. So it's not so obvious how to weigh these things properly. So my point here is not that capitalism is evil or that socialism is great. My point is that these things are much more nuanced and complex than you think, and they're more nuanced than Jordan Peterson portrays them to be, and that conservatives portray them to be, and that it's very easy to make straw men out of these different stages, so you have to be very careful.